want to bring in our next guest here, Peter Schweizer. He is the president of the Government Accountability Institute and author of Red-Handed: How American Elites Get Rich Helping China Win. Peter, thanks so much for joining me. And I wanted to talk to you about where we are now in the trade war with China, because I mentioned your book in the opening there for our viewers because it is so important to understand what is currently going on between China and the U.S. and this ongoing trade war. Tell us, what is the latest on this, and how is the great decoupling going between the United States and China?
Well, I think Donald Trump deserves a lot of credit for taking this issue on in a very real and direct way. A lot of the focus in his talk about the trade issue has been on issues like deindustrialization in the United States, the trade imbalance, et cetera. But I think lurking behind that is the larger issue of what I would call a Trump grand strategy involving China. If you look at what the trade policy is, it's really geared to changing China's behavior, not just on economic matters or on exports, but on things like fentanyl. There's a specific tariff on China because of China's involvement. I would say they're really the senior partner in the fentanyl trade and the effect that it's having on the United States. But if you look at other topics like the Panama Canal, there's been this discussion about the Panama Canal. The focus is on Chinese control and the desire to get rid of, Chinese management on both ends of the Panama Canal. I think even when you look at Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the efforts to negotiate a peace deal there, regardless of what one thinks about what the details of what that agreement should be, clearly this is part of a Trump effort to, in a sense, move Russia away from China, further isolating China globally. So I think this is a full-on press with China. We're at a waiting game right now. China's saying they're not going to negotiate. Trump doesn't indicate that he's going to weaken any. But I do think time is on the president's side here. Yes, the increase of goods in the United States may go up. There may be some economic disruptions. But the media reports out of China are that tens of thousands of Chinese are losing their jobs because factories are being closed. This is an economy driven primarily by exporting to the United States and exporting to the Western world. If they can't do that very effectively, they're in deep economic trouble.
Well, Peter, I'm so glad you talked about the grand strategy here, because I think people miss this big picture here by looking at, what are prices doing today or tomorrow and that sort of thing, which is all important, of course. But we've seen now factory orders in China have now plummeted to their lowest level in 16 months. But we're also seeing, we know now that China has engaged in all sorts of practices, mercantilist practices, currency manipulation, dumping of goods, intellectual property theft. And as you suggest, China is also behind so many things from Iran to Pakistan to Ukraine. They're the bad actor in a lot of this. The aim here then must be then to get China to change a behavior that's also not going well for it, because its own economy has become very out of balance by their own behavior.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the media coverage in the United States, and a lot of it, by the way, being driven by Wall Street firms who have huge financial interests in China and whose access to that vast Chinese market is predicated on being on good terms with the CCP. If you follow that coverage, you would think the United States is in big trouble and China has the upper hand. That is simply not the equation when you look at the numbers. So I think, look, Trump deserves a lot of credit. He hasn't executed it perfectly by any means, but he deserves a lot of credit for actually taking this issue on. Presidents have talked about it. Barack Obama talked about it a little bit. Trump did in his first term. Joe Biden sort of tipped his hat to the rise of China and the threat that China represented, but nobody wanted to confront them. And the way that you have to confront China, similar to what Ronald Reagan did during the Cold War, you have to play to their weaknesses, not to their strength. And China's weakness strategically is its dependence on exports to the West. That is the engine that drives their economy, and their economy is sputtering, and this is, a deep problem. So I think President Xi is confronted by this reality of that he does not want to lose face to Donald Trump, but on the other hand, his economy is tottering, and things are only going to get worse. Let's remember, big American companies like Apple have announced they are going to pull production of the iPhone for the U.S. market completely out of China. They're going to move all the production to India. So there are more shoes to drop as time goes along. That is not a good situation for President Xi.
Finally, Peter, before I let you go, I just want to get your quick thoughts on some charges that China has made, escalating the war of words here, saying that there is substantial evidence that the United States was actually responsible for COVID. Now, I thought this was kind of interesting because, of course, there is the matter of all that American funding to that Wuhan lab. What did you make of this? And is this another sort of front that they're going to try and open up in the war of words on trade?
Yeah, I mean, look, China doesn't take responsibility for anything. They never have. And they continue to still talk about the opium wars of the 19th century and how that is what has held back China even to this day. The CCP does not take responsibility. The notion that ultimately COVID was the fault of the United States is absurd. There certainly was a role played by certain virologists in the United States and the government funding. But here is what we know, and I talk about this in my book, Blood Money. We know that there was a lab leak in China, and we know that Chinese scientists knew in early November of 2019, that this was a virus that was transferable from person to person. They knew that in the early November of 2019. They did not tell the West this fact until the end of January. And what did they do in the 3 months that they had? They had this knowledge and the rest of the world didn't. They cornered the market on PPE supplies, masks, gowns, etc. So they had maximum leverage over us when they revealed this fact to the rest of the world. And they undertook other steps, as I count in my book, to maximize the body count in the United States. They call it disintegration warfare. It's based on a book written in 2012 by Chinese military officers. President Xi has embraced it. And the idea is they are going to engage in aggression against the United States and the West short of a kinetic war. And this is a kind of aggression that can lead to casualties and death, economic disparities, et cetera. That is exactly what China's doing, and they did that with COVID.